Stop saying Agile is dead. It's not dead. It just really sucks. And while not dead, it has definitely been the victim of identity theft, meaning the sad, painful, and like super frustrating state of Agile practices currently barely resembles what it was originally drafted to be. For me, starting in Agile in around 2009, moving from engineering into a Scrum Master role, into an Agile coach role, becoming a licensed Scrum trainer, back into engineering, I've kind of seen this from all angles. So I know that there's no real quick fix, and that's not what this video is. I'm not going to talk about some new framework, but I do think it's important to unpack this whole Agile is dead thing so we can orient to the current state. Why is it so terrible right now? What happened? And then we can start to have a discussion on maybe what's next for our industry. What's the next evolution? So there's a couple of different types of takes on this Agile is dead thing. One here from Goiko is basically saying Agile isn't dead necessarily. It's just that it's done its job and now it's just business as usual. He's saying if you look back 30 years ago, the average software release cycle took several months, if not years. And now it happens in a few weeks. It's no longer innovative, exciting, worthy of keynote talks or passionate meetups. The revolution happened, succeeded, and passed, which is the crux of his argument here. People just got on with their jobs. Another example, automation testing is just a regular thing now. Continuous integration just works because someone already set it up. People are no longer getting stuck reading hundreds of pages of requirements that everyone knows are total BS. So essentially the argument is Agile is done. It served its purpose. You're doing exactly as expected. You're not reinventing the wheel, but just riding on it. So really interesting kind of take. And that's shared with a lot of people. I think there's truth to this, but it's not the whole picture. Another really interesting and more nuanced take from Kyle here, who I highly recommend you go follow him on LinkedIn and anywhere else. Really interesting kind of philosopher, developer content. He talks about linguistic drift and word pollution and how essentially over time, our culture, our community will take words and shift its meaning over time. And he talks about the word literally, who obviously literally doesn't mean literally anymore. What it used to mean was exactly according to my words, no exaggeration, with the emotional resonance of take this very seriously. And he gives the example of here, if your face is literally going to fall off, which obviously doesn't mean literally fall off, it means figuratively. And the emotional resonance has a bit of emphasis. What he says here is it takes useful words and makes them useless. Really, like, read the post. It's really interesting. But what he argues is that the same thing has happened with Agile and you could say with Scrum and other types of terms where over time the word has come to mean something completely different than what it originally meant. And what you see is this sort of backlash against that. Well, that's not Agile. Have you even read the manifesto? Have you even read the Scrum guide? It's not DevOps. Have you even read the Phoenix Project or read a DevOps report? So we get into this like dictionary war about the definition of words, essentially. It's really just not helpful. And like I said, you've seen this with Scrum too, and I was right there in the dictionary war fighting against kind of the hostile takeover of the Scrum definition. I actually was a licensed Scrum trainer. I was interviewed by Ken Schwaber, who was a co-creator of Scrum, and spent multiple sessions with him over years with the other trainers. I'm sure he doesn't know who I am, but he talked about this idea of Scrum being, quote, immutable. And the idea there was to try to preserve the definition of Scrum because he actually foresaw this happening, that the industry trying to co-opt it and take Scrum and turn it into something that it was never intended to be. So he created the Scrum guide. There is a literal 17-page, there's a 17-page Scrum guide that spells out exactly what Scrum is. And still, the industry has changed its meaning. It doesn't really mean Scrum anymore. And if you don't believe me, read the Scrum guide and then go look at YouTube for Scrum and how developers feel about it, or any real team members really. And a lot of the really big tech YouTubers talk about how Agile has seen its heyday, how people hate Scrum, and the things they talk about hating aren't actually even in the Scrum guide, or they're not even a part of the Agile manifesto or the principles. Used to really frustrate me, and I would get into these type of holy war type of discussions where, no, you're not doing Scrum type of a thing, and not because I was trying to be dogmatic, I think. Maybe I was a little bit, but mostly because I too wanted to preserve that definition. Because, for example, people just complain so much about story points and velocity and how they have to make a sprint commitment up front, and that's what they hate about Scrum. It's just like mini waterfalls. That's actually not Scrum, but it doesn't really matter anymore because that's what the industry believes Scrum is. That's how it's been implemented. So let's look at modern Agile and how it compares to the original Agile Manifesto. And so what I've done is I've kind of sliced out the pieces of the Agile Manifesto and overlaid what I think is what modern Agile looks like. In the original manifesto, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. I think that's really more changed to we are being told better ways of developing software by non-technical managers and coaches. And I am the manager right now, and I've been the coach, and I've been very guilty of this, going in as a talking head, thinking I know what's best, trying to slap down the process as the one right way of doing things, versus really stepping back, giving the team the space to allow their processes to emerge. That doesn't really happen in modern Agile. The other value, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. When I was a Scrum Master, I struggled with this because what I was really trying to focus on was creating the systems of interaction, systems of communication, systems of work, so that the team itself was optimized. But all my managers seemed to care about was JIRA, was like, are we going to meet our commitment? Are we on track for delivery? It basically just becomes project management. And, I'm not even going to really talk too much about scaled Agile framework SAFe, but it's another example of where the focus really has shifted to frameworks, processes, and tools. That's kind of what modern Agile looks like because it's easier to sell. The other value here, working software over comprehensive documentation. I think working valuable software, the intent is that is the main measure of value for a team. But I think that it's kind of shifted away to metrics. That's why I ended metrics here. Did a team achieve their velocity of 30 points? Who cares? But I guess the managers and the leaders care about that because they see the teams as essentially just delivery factories, feature factories. And then comprehensive documentation, we might not have BRDs, those big 100-page documents anymore, but teams are still expected to not engage in the work until all the pre-steps have been completed. For example, we need all the UX mocks kind of spelled out, or we need all the acceptance criteria in a user stories spelled out. So the documentation has just become more robust, really. That's not just a flat list of requirements anymore, but really nothing has really changed here in my opinion. We still don't let teams necessarily engage in the upfront stuff in parallel. The next one, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Really, this one kind of got thrown out by modern Agile. Team members don't work with customers. Maybe, rarely. I'm sure I have a few times, but generally speaking, we never talk to a customer. We never see a customer. We don't know who they are, what they want. We are told what to build. We are the builders. And then contract negotiation, still alive and well. Every team I've ever been on pretty much has had a definition of ready, which is essentially a checklist of things that have to happen before we can start the work. That's a contract. How is that not a contract? We need all the mocks created. We need all the acceptance criteria. We need an estimate. We need all the dependencies identified. We need the designs, the workflows. You are basically saying, okay, this is exactly what you're going to go build. Are we good now? Now go build this exact thing. And then the last one, responding to change over following a plan. I think we've gotten better as an industry. Modern Agile has sliced these plans smaller, but it's still very common for sprints basically to just be a large project plan sliced up into 2-week chunks. And even a sprint itself has become a fixed scope plan. We will deliver these 4 features, not we will achieve this goal. And product roadmaps are basically, they look suspiciously like a project plan with a Gantt chart because that's all they are. Essentially, it's a list of features spread out over time versus a North Star, a set of goals, signposts for where we want to be. And you can have scope in there as well, but they've essentially become a large portfolio plan. So even outside of the manifesto, modern Agile kind of grew legs and turned into something even more perverse. For the quote Agilists, was basically a silver bullet, right? It was how Agile people went in and tried to enact change because, well, it's in the manifesto. When the manifesto was never intended to be a strict set of guidelines, It was more of a set of values, a way of thinking. But, people would go in and kind of just smack people around with the manifesto. It was never intended to be a religion or a dogma. The other thing that happened is it kind of became it was associated with this like impossible promise of twice the work in half the time. And that was Jeff Sutherland's, I'll say, infamous book. It's not a bad book, but that title, man, that just killed us. Agile became a way to just get more done faster. Another thing I've seen, Agile as sort of an excuse for self-imposed chaos. Like, yeah, I know you had to scrap what you worked on 3 times this sprint, and you had to work overtime, and we had to fix these 2 defects, and oh, by the way, you were also like trying to do planning for next quarter, and the kitchen needed cleaning, so we needed you to do that too. But it's okay, we're Agile. I mean, how many times I have heard that as an excuse for just having shitty or no actual good management, good processes. It has become a product itself. It's something that is sold, and certifications and the coaching and the frameworks. If you look at Scaled Agile Framework, my God, all of the money that's been made there, training on this framework, Agile became a product. And then the last thing I noted here was I refer to it as ceremonial garb, where there's a perception that they feel like we're, quote, Agile because they see the team huddled around a table, or they go into Jira and they can see like the plans, and they can see the cute little board with the stories moving across. And maybe you've heard of it referred to as like Agile in name only, or Agile theater. It's kind of all the same type of thing where you're going through the motions so that you can have the appearance of having changed or made some sort of improvement, but really you haven't really changed. You just put new words to your same old processes. Well, that was cheery. Sorry about that if it was too dark or depressing, but I just wanted to align on where I think, quote, Agile, what it actually means. And, to me, I don't want to overstate it or be overdramatic, but Agile at one point meant something to me. It was something I was excited about. It wasn't just a job title or whatever. To me, it was finally saying, hearing companies say, we're willing to invest in a more human-centric approach to software development. We're willing to accept that software development is different than construction. It's different than these other types of projects that our project management professionals are trained to run. And we're open to changing how we do that, how we structure it. That's why I think it was kind of a letdown, the current state that we're in. And I look back at my time in coaching and as a manager who was trying to implement Agile practices. And I think there were a couple of failures I think we can learn from. And when we start looking at the next steps we can take, I think we need to learn from these things. I think one big thing is Agile coaching failed, I think, generally speaking. Now, there are good coaches out there, but even the good coaches, I think, failed to connect the dots between what we want and what the business wants. And what we want and care about, which is what I just mentioned, I was excited about, human-centric approach, new ways of approaching complex software development. They don't care. They being the company, right? The man. They want it faster, better, cheaper. That is what the company wants. If they could outsource all of us to the AIs, they would do that. It's a company. It's a profit machine. We need to connect the dots between changes that we're wanting to make and what they care about. And I don't think coaches had that skill set. When I went in as a coach, I thought it was enough to be skilled in, quote, Agile, the structures and the learnings in that body of knowledge. I thought it was enough. It was not enough. We failed at being influencers at the right levels. That's one big thing. The other big thing is, I don't know that it's something any of us could control really, but it's this idea of Agile as a product, that it's something that can be sold and installed, that you can take a 2-day course and be trained as being able to lead a team. That productization of Agile, I think, really hurt the movement. And who knows, maybe it'll be different this next decade because there won't be as much free money floating around. So in a previous video, I got some really awesome critical but constructive feedback that in my videos, a lot of my advice amounts to basically get good or suck it up or stop being a wuss and just accept it the way it is. So in this video in particular, it's gonna be a little tough to provide actual guidance. I do think accepting the way things are and not just sitting and stewing in frustration all the time, I think is the most healthy approach for us as individuals. I still stand by that kind of advice in general. Accept the way things are. Now, if you are like me and you do have a lot of frustration or disappointment in kind of how the industry is going, I think we can turn that into positive energy. I mean, what do we do about this? We've tried kind of taking back the word agile by creating new words for what modern agile actually has become, like wagile or fragile or scrummerfall. I was just thinking this morning and I made up badgile or sagile. We could, we've tried that. That didn't work. We have to accept that we lost the brand. That was stolen or confiscated or purchased or whatever. How I'm approaching this is I have been for years, kind of cutting bait from Agile. I've been separating myself from that word and all of the modern trappings of what's in that word. So I try to talk in much more specifics now. I don't just say we want to be more agile. I talk about we want to release twice a week now instead of only once a sprint. Very, very specifics rather than some vague umbrella term. But that leaves, what do we call this thing that used to be agile? What I think agile provided was a kind of moral compass almost. Again, I don't want to overstate it, but it's almost like kind of like an ethical code almost. And I really do think that our industry is desperately lacking ethical standards in that way. So I don't know what the answer is, but there does need to be something, I think, that replaces Agile and kind of takes its place as what we, the team members, how we want to define how we work in this industry. And I think we need to get more specific than just a manifesto, than just a set of values. So an ethical code, even a standard set of practices that can evolve, because the meaning and the values and the people who still believe in what Agile meant, we're all still here. We just kind of went underground. And I think a lot of us are waiting for something else to kind of gain traction. So again, I have no idea how to solve this problem, but I think it is a problem worth trying to solve.